Well, I'm pleased to welcome Carole Hill back to the stage. Carole is the Chief Information Officer at Wilbur-Ellis, where she spent the past almost 4 years leading a company-wide shift towards a more intentional, data-driven strategy. Wilbur-Ellis was founded in 1921, and they serve customers at the start of the North American agriculture and food systems. Its businesses include crop protection, nutrition, seed development, and chemical manufacturing, with the purpose to provide essentials for the world to thrive. Carole has guided the organization from a place where data was seen as inaccessible and unreliable to one where unified trusted data drives better analysis, operational efficiency, and AI innovation. Under her leadership, Wilbur-Ellis has modernized its data foundation to enable more confident and timely decision-making, stronger customer relationships, and measurable business outcomes. Carole brings a very practical, outcomes-focused approach to transformation. And under her leadership, Wilbur-Ellis has been able to turn data into its true competitive advantage. Please join me in welcoming Carole.
Thanks.
So, Carole, one of the things that you mentioned was that the company realized at some point that a real transformation needed to take place. Can you bring us back to that exact moment?
Yeah, so I was hired on 4 years ago specifically to lead data strategy. So even prior to me getting there, the company was talking about how they wanted to grow digitally. So within modernizing applications, but also the digital footprint for the organization. And with that became conversations around data. And a big part of what you would hear around Wilbur-Ellis is our data was bad. And how are we going to get things going? So thankfully for me, after 20 years being in this space, probably 20 plus years of fighting for people to understand data was truly an asset and a competitive advantage for us, that legwork had already started for me. So I got to come in and move forward with that. But it was about data-driven decisions. There is a lot of emotion between growers and agronomists out there. The relationships are still handshakes. So for a lot of folks, they think they have very profitable customers, but some of that's because they like to play golf together or, have a beer, or they go to church together. And so it was starting to think about things more from that fact-based, data-driven perspective. And it really took our leaders to own that, support that. And of course, with AI now, 2 years after they made that decision, it was like, oh, thank goodness we had started there and moved forward.
Yeah, that's right. I think this morning you mentioned, and I think as part of the panel really touched upon accountability as being so critical. And so I think you mentioned that data was viewed as bad, unreliable, and you really had to get the broader stakeholders to embrace data as a strategic asset. Can you walk us through how you were able to effect that change?
So IT was a black box, to be honest. It was, hey, I need data for a report. And that would go into a project management office and get, passed on to us. And very disconnected between IT and the business. So by the time they got the report, they were like, this isn't what I was looking for, or you've gotten to this too late, and your data is bad. So we have the exact same data we had before. We just upskilled our technology so that we could get to it quicker, more near real time. We revisited how it was modeled. So we had a data modeler before that was very much by that Ralph Kimball mindset, and everything was built that way. So we had a lot of factless facts, and it was very hard for our users to get to the data. So again, they felt it was bad. What we've seen, we actually use Power BI for our self-service reporting, is now that they can get to the data in a quicker, more accessible way, they're starting to realize that it's not IT's ownership of that data, but what they're finding is processes that they have are making the data incomplete or it's missing. They're going back because they can see the data lineage now and say, wow, this came directly from our ERP this way. And so they're starting to take ownership, without just saying you need to, govern your data better. They're starting to see it for themselves. I use analogies a lot, but it's kind of like your kids. You tell them to put their helmets on, and until they hit their head, they're like, oh, that's why mom said to do that. And so it's the same with the data. As they're getting in there, they're seeing that it's their own data entry themselves. And it's not that our data is bad. It was hard to get to, and it was probably lacking timeliness to get to it.
I can see that. You've mentioned before that the biggest challenge is not just the technology, it's really the change management and that shift in accountability. And you just walked us through such a great example of how they accountability is not something that's pushed onto them, but something that they come to realize.
Yes.
And so, walk us through a little bit of whether they came to you, having realized that, whether they came to you for guidance, and how did you take the sort of next phase of that change management?
Yeah, a big part of it was involving them from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So again, moving away from that more waterfall mindset of someone tells you the requirements, you go into a box and deliver. It was bringing them along, showing them data along the way, or letting them source it themselves and say, maybe that's not what I want, or where is this? Or why does this field have 50 different attributes in it? It should have one. So that was them asking us questions and us being there to help explain that to them. And then that drives the governance. It's certainly you can always build logic into IT to parse things apart, but how do we start to control that and make that data entry better? In addition to that, teaching folks that they are data stewards. So you have people that sit in HR, you have people that manage your item list, and without bringing them truly onto the data governance team, it's explaining to them their role. They are a data steward, and how that initial input of that data flows all the way through to a report and ultimately a KPI or data-driven assessment. So it's been a change for IT to talk to the business, but they've upskilled their acumen, and of course the business is starting to understand the IT world a bit more.
And it sounds like both sides came out feeling even more empowered and having great clarity on terms of the role they can play in effecting that change.
And value, what am I truly building, or why am I creating this report?
Right. Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, I think one of the things that you mentioned to me in our prior conversations is that you really build your data priorities around key business KPIs, and you're very intentional and very strategic about where to start. Can you walk us through that approach?
Yeah. The lift from one technology to another is not simple. We know this, especially if you're going to redo the entire model underneath the hood. And so it was identifying through somewhat of a simple matrix of what are the overall KPIs that the organization wants to hold themselves accountable to, and what is that data set that we need. So you'd have the KPI across the top and your domains and data sets to the left. And so it's placing X's and O's in there of, do I need customer data? Do I need item data? What is it that I need to solve this? And then the second phase, I'd almost call it a heat map, is what is the health of that data to get to that KPI? So even within a customer or an item, a certain KPI might be simple because you've got really solid attributes to define that, where the next KPI down with an item or customer doesn't hold true. And a big example for us was customer. So that's our grower, our farmer. Customer was in at least 75% of those KPIs. Well, when you thought about customer at our organization, that unique identifier was not a unique customer. We might have 5. That customer might be set up 5 times, or 3 times if it's a different ERP, but even within the same ERP. So we started to take a look and say, well, we have customer, but we don't really have it at a level or a mastered, entity that we can truly see, say, profitability.
Right.
And that's when, Reltio was our choice of MDM to come in and help us take those customers down almost 50%. So again, you might look at someone and say, hey, they're doing great. Well, there's 2 other accounts that are also theirs. Let's add it together. But it really was that heat map of, where's the biggest hitter? For us, date's always one, right? But customer, and then how healthy was that data and what could we tackle first?
That's such a great example of how that unified view really changes the game in terms of your understanding of the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We actually went to the leaders and asked them what a customer was, and I got 20 different answers. So it was even what do we consider a customer? So
I'm not surprised about that, and I'm sure that really reinforced the need for change with great urgency.
Yes.
If fundamentally there's not a single definition of customer, and that's one of the most important things about the business.
Yeah. And we see that with location too. What is a location?
Right.
Is it land? Is it a building? Is it a financial attribute? But it gets passed around all the time.
And this morning you mentioned how just the land as a GPS unit, obviously that has a lot of downstream implications on your business.
Yes.
Yeah. And so agriculture is unpredictable with markets, weather, supply chains, and global economics. How does a unified data foundation help Wilbur-Ellis become more adaptable in this time of disruption?
Well, interestingly enough, when I started 4 years ago, the agriculture industry isn't where it is today. It was in a much more booming aspect, if you will. You weren't watching every penny. And then within the last 2 years, it's been tough. It's been really tough on growers, which then passes on to us, which passes on to our suppliers. And so the fact that we had started a core, curated, mastered adventure with our data, it allowed us when we got to those tough times to not have to panic and not have to restart and again pull that emotion out of what's going on. So it was clear that having a sound data foundation ahead of critical times was super important. And then it's just a matter of how can you take that external data, be it weather, IoT from machines, and layer that on top of what you have today to make even more strategic decisions quicker. And
That's
again,
right.
I was talking about agentic AI or operational AI before, but that data foundation is so important that as you start to layer more things in, you can get to better data through your AI too.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear a little bit of an example of the impact that this modern data foundation has been able to unlock in terms of better decision making, AI adoption. Can you give us an example of that visibility has really had major impact on business decisions?
Well, I mentioned customer profitability, and honestly, that was huge for us. So, mastering the customer, not just to understand their profitability, but to truly understand all of the sales that they've made. You want to own that full acre, which means you want the seed, the chemical, and the fertilizer. You don't just want to sell them one input, and you want their whole farm. And so by mastering this, we were able to start to take data we already had and relate it to each other. On top of that, we implemented a CRM. So again, mastering your customer allowed you to start plugging applications in much more seamlessly. And within that application that we purchased, there's some AI. So now when we're asking it, what did Carole buy last year? You don't get one of those 5 accounts.
Right.
You can see that full picture. And certainly you can always get to the lower levels of detail. There might be some value in those different pieces. And then with AI too is helping it to aggregate across data we don't even own and again, pull that full view, 360 view of what's going on. So, there's a lift there, but there's an understanding of where you want to head as an organization is what to focus on first.
Yes.
And that customer aspect of it was huge.
And I think you mentioned this morning too, it's really important that AI not hallucinate with some of these data domains being so critical. You mentioned it's not just the chemicals, there's impact on humans and animals that need to be considered. So can you speak to us a little bit about how you're approaching AI adoption responsibly and finding the right balance between innovation and governance?
Yeah, so there's easy things, right? Microsoft Copilot, set it loose on your emails, your Microsoft applications. It's okay if it hallucinates a little bit. A lot of times it's your own data, and so you're like, that's not right. And I constantly ask the teams to use those thumbs up, thumbs down, what's working, what's not. But when it comes to legal aspects, that's where we got to be really careful. So, we certainly can recommend a particular chemical to kill a weed or deal with a pest that's out there, but if it's not regulated in that county, even, say in California, that customer doesn't have a permit to have that restricted use product. Our driver doesn't have the hazard permit to drive it, or the vehicle itself or the warehouse it's stored in. So there are so many pieces around that
Right.
that we're in the process of piloting and getting really trusted, knowledgeable folks on our team to review it and assess it. It's hard for me to think that any operational AI is going to be without a gut check,
Right.
Especially in that case, because you're talking millions of dollars or someone's livelihood if you end up destroying their soil or their crop as you go. And certainly, with the Endangered Species Act and those other things, we got to be really careful about weather-wise when you spray things, because the wind can't, it can't end up in the river and things like that. So, there's so much data out there. And I think it's going to be very beneficial for us to prevent a lot of these things, but we can't get lazy and just assume it always has the right answer for us.
That's such a complex set of factors with major implications. Obviously, as CIO, you're really guiding the team. This morning, Ethan Mullock talked about the lab and really working through the organization. I'm just curious how you're providing guidance to your team and across the company so that there's alignment on that kind of proper balance and considerations for the guardrails.
Yeah, it's a lot of education and show and tell. And as everyone's bored, they're anxious to have AI up and running and going. And some of it's just showing them the steps along the way. We're doing our best to encourage folks to develop agents that can be used across any of the AI tools. So for example, if you want to know your inventory balance, let's build an agent. We use Snowflake, so within Cortex, build that agent, and then your other AI applications can call it. That way your security is also embedded in there, because you're certainly fearful of someone exposing too much data.
Right.
Maybe I can see it, but then I hand it off to the next person who shouldn't.
Right.
And if that security is not there from a data perspective, it's very concerning. So we're trying to be mindful of where's the best place for that data security to sit. How do we educate and almost have like a marketplace within the organization to say you want inventory or you want an employee hierarchy. I mean, it can be all kinds of different things, but it's built already. Use it. And they're going to use it, so it's just getting that information out as soon as you can.
Yeah, and I'm hearing that composable approach is also enabling that governance to go everywhere as well,
Yes.
and not be contained.
That's the idea. I mean, I think yesterday the data-first architecture is where a lot of us need to head, because these applications are going to start being built by who knows within the organization, and so getting that data secured, structured, and governed makes it okay for some of these applications to pop up, and you feel more confident.
We're seeing that major shift from app-centric architectures to data-first architectures. And so can you speak a little bit about where you are in that journey at Wilbur-Ellis?
We're getting there.
Yeah.
I think, again, some of that's the leadership understanding how important data is. It's also been over the past 4 years of how fast we can move to bring up a new application.
Yeah.
Because so often the application itself has a lot of great features in it, but all you're doing is putting your, non-unified, non-curated data in it.
Creating
and now
more
it's
silos.
fancier. It's a fancier way to look at the data. And so, again, having the team to be able to explain to the executives, this is why we need to get customer mastered, or this is why we need to relate products to our manufactured items. You then can plug and play systems so much easier, because that the data is good, regardless how, which tool you pull up. And of course, if they have AI in it, it's so much better. But
of course.
I can't give enough kudos to our executives for that light bulb turning on. So
yeah, they probably recognize just the tooling will keep changing.
Yes.
And so we need
especially if AI can build models and build UI interfaces, and again, it's the data is what's your competitive advantage, and your data is what you're going to be able to, how you're going to be able to see these data insights within whatever application is built.
Yeah. So many here in this room are really working on that kind of change within the organizations as well. Looking ahead, just a shift, I'm wanting to talk to you a little bit about how do you see your role as CIO evolving over the next 12 months?
I touched on it a little bit on the panel, but it's, how do you govern and secure enough that, all the business functions out there can utilize AI to build what they need? For finance wants a financial model, operations wants something logistics related, P&C is going to want to understand employee related data, and they're going to be able to talk to things and say, hey, build this for me. And then they're going to get excited about it, and off it goes. And you want to encourage that, but at the same time, again, govern where that data is coming, ensure it's secure. If they are able to tap into external data sources, be it USDA, weather, other information out there, how secure is that pipeline? Because, unfortunately, AI brings a lot of bad actors as well, and so, we got to stay on top of that. But I see my role taking, you're not relying on IT so much to develop things anymore, but you are relying on for the single source of where is that data, how do I get to one place? I don't want point-to-point connections as well, bringing older systems down due to that processing. The other side of it for me is cost, because this is really cool, but the compute around these things and the cost around these things, we got to wrap our heads around that too. But I do see IT being less hands-on for everything technology related.
Probably providing more of the guidance and the overall framework with the proper
Yeah,
governance.
Here's some tools,
Yeah.
try to use these tools. This is what we pay for and recommend,
Yeah.
but again, there's so many out there, and it's embedded in so many applications already today.
Yeah, that's right. And so, obviously, there's a lot happening. A year from now, what does success look like for you?
I would say 2 years ago, the success was the business coming back to us and asking
Yes.
us for data. That was exciting versus, don't call IT, it's bad data, or it's going to take them 5 months to get it to me. So when they started showing up at our doorstep, asking us and being curious, that was a huge win.
Huge win.
For us. I think with this AI coming, it's a similar feeling,
Yeah.
I want to build this, or I have built this. Am I pulling it from the right place?
Right.
Can we productionalize this across, or enterprise grow this across the organization? I hope that I'm still a seat at the table. That's how, when you think about your hairdresser or your auto mechanic, you're not a lot of times going to go try that yourself without your trusted partner there. And I want to still continue to be a trusted partner for the organization and part of the business strategy, but also, just questioning, am I doing this right? And keeping us informed.
Because IT has earned its seat at the table.
Yes.
And so it's about really continuing that impact.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I have a great team, so it's not all me.
Of course. What do you think is the biggest challenge facing CIOs today? And do you have any words of advice for this room where many are in leadership positions, and there's obviously a lot happening in the data space? Any words of advice?
I think because of the size of our organization, we're not gigantic. We're not a Fortune 500. I've been there. We're not, global at this point. We've divested some pieces. I think the challenge is everyone's urgency to get into AI. And if you've got 5 ERPs, 50, you name it.
Right.
It's not as easy to get to the point that we're at. And, it's the pressure of get into AI from board members and C-levels it can be very daunting because you're trying to explain that, yeah, we can turn things on, but you're going to get the same, it's the garbage in, garbage out, right? And so I think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of folks that haven't gotten to that more curated, structured data. And then, I'm just going to touch on the security and governance of it all again, and controlling costs. And, you got to let people go. They're going to do it. They're going to use AI. And it's just how do you stay alongside of them? I also see in 2 years, we don't talk about AI as a thing as much, kind of like the internet. It's there. We don't, hey, I'm going to do this on the internet. We're used to it. And I think AI is just going to be part of our natural progression in how we work. So it'll be interesting for sure. But again, the challenge, if you don't have your data in a good spot, you're going to struggle with the growth of this really quickly.
Yeah, the challenges will really quickly compound themselves, whereas from what I've heard of your experience and Wilbur-Ellis's experience, if it's done right, then the advantages also start compounding themselves.
Yeah. And you can't make it perfect, right? You always want your data to evolve and to grow and to, encompass external pieces as well. And so it's making sure those pipelines, you can get it all connected and hooked up as soon as possible.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for providing us a great perspective. I think we have a few minutes if there's questions from the audience. I think I see there's one person here, Senator, and we'll get the microphone over to you.
Thank you for sharing. One question comes to mind is that you mentioned that the business perspective was the data was bad, and you addressed that by creating self-service Power BI reporting. That comes with its own problem. You got now too many dashboards. Everybody's got their own view. So one, I'm curious to understand how you address that challenge, and the other thing is that after making these changes, how did you, or were you able to figure out what is their trust level now? How do you, capture that? Yeah, thank you.
So, a couple things, and for a long time, I'm like, ooh, this self-service is just Excel on steroids. We're going to get out of control again. We held a lot of educational sessions with the business as to why you go through dev, test, prod, why you ensure there's security. So a lot of those checks and balances that we would do in IT, we did some training for the business on. Now, was it perfect? No. Again, I go back to you tell your kid to wear their helmet. They don't always, and then they figure it out. So interestingly enough, we are at a point is, the business is saying maybe we're giving folks too much data. And what they mean by that is there's just a plethora of dashboards out there. So they're starting to hone in now on, how do we give you data that you can act upon, that you can control and act upon? So again, they're taking the lead on that. So in a way, we did take a step back, I'll be honest, but a lot of step forward with that. How we know it's successful is they went from looking at reporting every month to weekly. So our season is March through May in a lot of our, corn and soybean area, and they were waiting a month at a time to take action. Now they call it the war room, but they get those dashboards in front of people, they take action, they flex, whether it's inventory, sales, weather's driving different trends that we're seeing. So they rely on the data, they know that it's good data, and they're finding those holes and assessing them either through process or data entry to begin with so that they can answer the right questions. So.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're coming close on time. Please join me in thanking Carole for her insights and her perspective.
Yeah. Thanks.